As promised in the previous hour, we take you back to the South Africa Investment Conference 2020, and I hand over to SABC News economics editor Thandeka Gqubule, who is standing by. A very good afternoon to you, Thandeka.
Thank you very much, Flo Ledwaba, for introducing us and this very important interview with the President of the Republic of South Africa, President Cyril Ramaphosa. Mr. President, thank you for joining the SABC and South Africans. As you know, the public broadcaster is very honored to have you this afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you.
You join us at a time that is very critical in the history, in the economic history of this country. Unemployment is at an all-time low. Per capita incomes are declining rapidly. In fact, if you look at a graph of per capita incomes, which is a measure of the well-being of the people, when you look at it when we burst into democracy in 1994 compared to where it sits now, we have almost erased in terms of per capita incomes the benefits of democracy. So how is a conference like this going to assist us as a country to pick up per capita income and to meet the promise of a better life for all that was promised when this democracy was instituted?
Well, thank you very much. It's good to chat to you. We're not doing very well on many of the indicators, and the per capita income is one of those indicators that I look at where we are not doing well. And this is an area of great concern to myself and to my fellow members of the cabinet. It is precisely because of that and many other challenges that we face, such as unemployment, the poverty, the inequality that affects so many of our people, that we are embarking on measures like this to mobilize for investments from both the local investors as well as offshore investors. It was precisely for this reason that 3 years ago I set up a target of $100 billion, which translates into 1.2 trillion rand of investments that I wanted us to attract to our country. Because over time, and this has taken time, 10 years and more, we've seen investment tapering down, particularly at all levels, the public sector investments as well as the private sector investment. It's been tapering off, and the great demonstration of this is infrastructure investment. I often say that infrastructure is the flywheel of any economy. It is when you see people in the construction sector busy putting up infrastructure, roads, bridges, dams, and hospitals and schools and so on, and housing developments, that you really can see that an economy is moving forward and people are earning money. So that had gone down, and through this type of investment we're trying to boost the infrastructure investment in our country, and I think we are on the way to doing that.
And how will this impact the ordinary person?
It will impact the ordinary person in that with infrastructure comes employment. With employment comes disposable income, which then feeds the other aspects of our economy, where people are then able to buy goods and services, and those who make those goods and services are then able to employ more people. So it has a virtuous sort of cycle or circle as it impacts on many aspects of our people's lives. So it is important that we should garner investments in our economy, because through that we generate economic growth, and with economic growth all the other attendant benefits then become possible.
We are very far from prosperity collectively, yes, as a people, and all the more so because of the impact, the economic impact of the coronavirus. Now, I've been looking at figures of Stats South Africa, they show a tapering downwards of public sector investment.
Yes.
And that's a worrying sign, sir, because public sector investment leads all other investment. And can you tell us how the investment in the infrastructure fund and the pooling of funds in the infrastructure fund will reverse this trend? Hopefully we'll see a tick upwards in public spending, and we will see the private sector coming to the party and the employment of blended finance.
Precisely the point. 2 years ago, I made an announcement that we should set up an infrastructure fund. A fund which in a way will be a fund of funds, which will attract private sector investment with a solid foundation of public sector investment. So the public sector would put money in, and it will be the igniter of attracting private sector investment. And through that, we will be able not only just to put money into projects, but to ensure that we've got a pipeline of projects which are fundable, projects that investors can make money from. And if they are well packaged from an engineering point of view, implementation point of view, then investors can flock in and invest. So that will be private sector being attracted. But the public sector would also be attracted, because our public sector is not only the fiscus, it's also our state-owned enterprises that are heavily involved in infrastructure, like your ESCOMs, like your Transnets, like your TCTA, which deals with water projects, and a number of others. So they too would be able to either co-invest alongside this infrastructure fund, or invest in their own name and right, and boost public sector investment.
Now, how will that happen if we are indeed seeing a trend of the deregulation, liberalization of the SOEs, and casualization of their workforces? If that is going to be one of the hallmarks, the critical hallmarks of your tenure, a la Yeltsin, sir, will we look forward to the obliteration of many of the public services that we normally can anticipate would be available? In fact, these SOEs were created by the apartheid government to deliver mass public services, but this deregulation and liberalization is going to take us in a different direction.
Well, I think you're talking about two things. The first one is whether the continued existence of the SOEs is guaranteed. And what I can say is that yes, we need state-owned enterprises to continue delivering the services that our people need. The issue of deregulation has to deal with reforms that we need to embark on to enable these public enterprises and our economy more broadly to function much easier, with greater efficacy from a governance point of view to an investment focus point of view, and to make sure that our ports, for instance, work much more efficiently and effectively. We've got not so much to deregulate, but we've got to reform them so that they're properly modernized, they are made much more efficient, and they are fit for purpose. And when it comes, for instance, to the people who work in our public enterprise sector, the people who work in our public enterprise sector should continue having their jobs, and it is when their state-owned enterprises work much more effectively and efficiently, and they increase their revenue and their profitability, that their jobs can be secured. And that is what we want to see, that public services have greater efficacy and public services are delivered efficiently, effectively, and cheaply to our people as a whole.
Now, I was itching to ask you, Mr. President, about a very interesting and fascinating discussion in NADLAC.
Yes, ma'am.
About separating the public mandates from the commercial side of the businesses.
Yes.
And that discussion was alluded to in your speech when you explained to us what the economic recovery plan of our country would contain.
Yes.
And you said we should consider pursuing perhaps a reform of these entities along the lines of Singapore and China, who did precisely that. But when you see the obliteration of the public mandate side of these SOEs that are long overdue for policy overhauls and have got archaic business and funding models, what do you think? Do you think we can achieve the model discussed in NADLAC?
Yes, I think we can. And I would say that we should never see the two as mutually exclusive. You can have a public enterprise pursuing and keeping, being faithful to its public mandate, but at the same time having a commercial capability that will make sure that it sharpens its wits in executing its public mandate. And that revolves around a variety of things. The corporate governance processes need to be so well structured. The commercial aspect needs to be so well structured as to reduce wastage, reduce fraud and corruption and all that. And once you package all these properly, you would then be able to achieve both. Have them operate commercially, to be able to make money so that they can offer services at a much cheaper rate. Because in the end, because they have a public mandate, we want them to operate in a way where they lighten the burden on the people of our country by reducing the costs, but at the same time increasing their dividend to the state. Now, the typical good example is those in China and those in Singapore.
Yes, indeed.
They've
We've
been
seen
able
the
to achieve
Chinese ones.
Yes.
They're part of the Fortune 500 companies.
Yes, ma'am.
They're global giants.
Yes, ma'am.
But beyond our concerns and our niggles about the SOEs, of which we have a great variety and many, around 700, what about us doubling down on austerity, as the Stats South Africa figures are telling us, in a sea of poverty? Is it morally acceptable, or is that what we're doing, or is it not what we're doing?
Well, I would not characterize what we're doing as austerity, although a number of people, commentators included, like yourself, look at them, the measures that we're taking as austerity. What we are seeking to do is to manage our public finances, and managing them in a way where we keep our eye on the debt. Our debt levels have gone far too high. And our debt levels having gone far too high means that our debt servicing costs have become astronomically high. And that should worry us, that having piled up the debt, and other people will have the attitude that, no, it doesn't really matter. You can have as much debt as you like. It's all very well said and done. But when you look at your service costs, as you service your debt and you suddenly find that your service costs amount to more than what your budget is, for instance, for health and education, that should tell you that something is really wrong. What then should you do? You should then say, let's live within our means. Let's cut our coats and jackets according to the cloth that we have. And what should we do? Remove all the frills, reprioritize, because in government sometimes we embark on various projects. Some of them do not have that great benefit that we want to achieve. We leave those that should have the greatest benefit. For instance, we will never touch social grants. the social grants that support the lives of 17 million people. We say that is sacrosanct. Whatever happens, we've got to keep our peoples. We will never touch what should go to education, to health and so forth. But we will want to look at how we spend the rand.
So you look after the debt and increase social spending. Last question, Mr. President. What can the ordinary Thandi and Sipho look forward to in terms of participating in many of these projects and the investment projects that are going to be rolled out, including the great infrastructure programs that are about to unfold?
The wonderful thing with our reconstruction and recovery plan is that in crafting it, we relied on our social partners, on communities as organized through various formations. We also relied on our unions, on business, and on government. Now, the four key role players in the economy of the political economy of our country got together and crafted a plan. And may I say, it's a plan that takes into account what should benefit communities, how business should deport itself, and how labor unions should, what role they should play in all this. So for instance, when we talk about investments, like we are talking about investments now, we are essentially telling the investors that you must know that when you invest in South Africa, you are investing in a country which very well organized environment, where people are interested in what your investment is going to yield for yourself, for the community, and for the fiscus. We want to look at all that, and everything must be transparent. And we want to know as a people what role we should play, what benefit we are going to get, so that it should never be anything about us without us participating. So, for instance, infrastructure. When an infrastructure project gets underway, it should never be company just arrives and plants its plans and then starts building. Community needs to be involved. It needs to be clear what skills are going to be left on the ground. It should be clear that it's not only, the white elephant buildings that are left in the ground. How is Mama Dlamini going to benefit from this? How is a Sipho, as you correctly say, going to benefit? So it should be an all-inclusive type of process. And this we crafted together, and we're hoping that and confident that as our plan takes root and it's implemented, we will see the creation of jobs that our people so need. We're going to see the empowerment of the women of our country, so that the women of our country, through what the private sector does and through what we do as the public sector in the form of procurement, we should be able to bring the women of our country into the mainstream of the economy. The cooperatives and a whole number of young people should also be brought in. So it should be an all type of benefit type of process where everyone sees that they can win and gain out of the initiatives that we embark upon.
Thank you, Mr. President, for talking to us about shared prosperity. And now let's take a short ad break. Thank you.